Hello, it's Paul Beckwith. I've been a member of AMEG, the Arctic Methane Emergency Group, for about 2.5 years. AMEG formed just about a month or so before I joined. There were a bunch of people in the UK who were very concerned about the Russian observations of large increases of methane gas bubbling up from the eastern Siberian Arctic shelf, continental shelf. Very large increases of methane relative to previous years. These measurements were confirmed by satellites, AIRS, atmospheric infrared sounder satellite, or atmospheric infrared sounder, so spectrometers on satellites, by other satellites, and also by flask measurements on the ground. We're talking about levels of, at that time, there were measurements of the ground and up in the upper atmosphere of on the order of 2,200 parts per billion. More recently, there's been measurements as high as 2,600 parts per billion. The global average is 1,800 parts per billion, but the levels are elevated in the Arctic. Now, so the Arctic Methane Emergency Group, basically, who is it? Okay, it's not, there's a lot of misconceptions about who we are. We're a bunch of people who have common concerns. We formed an email listserv, and anybody can join. In fact, if you want to join now, you know, I can put you on the list. You know, if you have some way to contribute and assist us, then great. If you wonder what we do, I invite you to join us. So what we do, it's not, one of the big misconceptions is that we have a blog called Arctic News. AMEG does not have a blog called Arctic News. One of our members, okay, who was a member roughly since we formed, and he was a member for about a year or so, which puts it, he left about 1.5 years ago. Sam Karana, he does his own blog. In fact, he does many, many blogs. And he basically gets observations and does some interpretation of them. But anything interesting out there on the web pertaining to methane and the Arctic, he will generally re-mirror it on his site, but he adds a lot of material to it. He does good work for the most part. I have had some differences with him on some of his statistics and some of his math, and we've hashed that out, and you know, he's doing his own thing. So some of these criticisms, for example, the Scott Johnson so-called rebuttal of Guy McPherson, lumping AMEG in with that is complete BS. Okay? He's talking about Sam Karana, information that Guy McPherson is using based on some of Sam Karana's stuff. Not AMEG, okay? That's one thing. Second thing is, you know, people have been saying AMEG is one scientist, Peter Wadhams at the UK, you know, just a scientist. Well, Peter is not just a scientist. He is the UK's, pretty much the UK's top sea ice scientist. He's a big name in the field. Read his book on sea ice that just came out recently. Peter has been doing field work in the Arctic for 35 years. Many of those years, he's been in a British nuclear submarine under the ice, measuring the thickness of the ice. Peter is not just a scientist. So he is he's clearly our most prominent, well-recognized scientist. To hear people slamming him they're worse than deniers to be doing this, in my opinion. John Neeson is the founder, one of the co-founders of AMEG. Okay, he has some science background, some technical background. There's myself. I'm an engineer, engineering physics. I'm also have a master's degree in laser physics, so I have tendencies towards being a physicist. And I've been teaching as a part-time professor, climatology and meteorology at the U of O. I can use that designation part-time professor or sessional. I'm also a PhD researcher working towards my PhD. I have chosen to spend a lot of time advocating and educating people about the dangers and risks of climate change. What point is there me getting a degree when the world, you know, if the planet is basically collapsing underneath me? So I want to find out the stuff that I know, the stuff that I determine, which other scientists would hold close to the vest and go through the publication and peer review process. I have chosen up to now not to do that. That is switching because I have to finish the degree at some point and I need 3 or 4 papers. So I'll be transitioning over to that, but I'm not going to stop talking about this stuff. I'm not going to stop talking about information that I know about the climate. In fact, I've been talking about the Arctic sea ice collapse causing jet stream waviness before Jennifer Francis's paper came out in March of 2012 or 2013, can't remember which one. Anyway, since AMEG formed, I've been talking about sea ice. I mean, AMEG's premise is sea ice is collapsing. Okay, it's dropping exponentially. Snow cover is also doing the same thing. The Arctic is warming very, very rapidly, and methane emissions are coming up, and we're worried they're going to get a lot worse. So we have ideas to cool the Arctic via some, call it geoengineering, cool the Arctic to keep the ice in place and the snow in place so the climate extremes, weather extremes don't go bananas while we slash emissions. We need to slash emissions. We need to get people on board to do this. We're running into enormous problems. So AMEG, who else is in AMEG? We have an IPCC officer. We have scientists who would prefer not to be named, or I need to check with them before I name them. But we have an IPCC author who is very well known and he's been an author a couple times, a reviewer and a primary author, I believe. We also have one of the top geoengineers in the UK. We have had regular email conversations with people like Francis. I personally have talked to Trenberth. I've talked to David Archer along with other people. Okay, we're coming at this from a different angle. With us, what you hear from us is exactly what our view is. Okay, there's no holes barred. There's no political stuff. None of us are doing this for money. We're not getting any cent for this affiliation and this email exchange group. We have a web page. Sam was the webmaster. When he left, it became much more sporadic. We do post some things on there. We have given presentations to the British Parliament, to the Canadian Parliament. We have presented lots of papers at conferences, etc. The individual scientists. But it's not just scientists. We have a filmmaker among us. We have a PhD economist among us. We have some engineers among us. We have a medical doctor among us. We're just people like you guys that are probably watching this, that are interested in climate change. Only we've been doing it for longer than you. We've been doing it, perhaps. I mean, we've been doing it as a group for 2.5 years. You know, now that things are getting a lot worse, people are looking at us more seriously. But you know, deniers haven't been too much of a problem with us. What's been a problem with us is groups like Global Warming Fact of the Day. You know, they call themselves Fact of the Day, and yet they put all these mistruths and misconceptions about AMEG. Granted, they came from Scott Johnson's and Michael Tobis's blogs, which we haven't bothered to reply to now. but consider this a rebuttal. You know, they're very welcome to call me, any of these people. 613-979-3957. You know, instead of trying to chip away at AMEG from the dark recesses, come directly and talk to me, and I can tell you all about AMEG and add you to the email list if you want. But I'm getting extremely sick of the largest opposition to what AMEG has been doing for years to be coming from so-called mainstream science people. You know, it's just insane. Anyway, it doesn't matter in the end. We continue what we're doing. We're not going to stop. And we need to solve this problem. There's lots of common ground that we have. Look at some of my previous videos to see what I think about how mainstream science, peer-reviewed science, is just not fast enough to meet the problems that we face with abrupt and extreme climate change and extreme weather. Thank you.